My
see what happens here. It starts flashing. You just do it again. Okay, welcome everybody. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Sorry for a bit of delay. Our Facebook Live was not working, so we came up with a roundabout workaround, which I think if you go on our Facebook page now, you can link to YouTube, and then go to YouTube and watch it. So hopefully that all works, but in any case, there will be a recorded version later available on YouTube anyway. We're here tonight to talk about Carol Stein's show that we're sitting in along the way, and we've got a special guest joining Carol, Lissa Hunter. I would normally give you the spiel on how to comment on Facebook and ask questions, but I don't think that's going to work. So if you are watching the live stream right now, I don't think you're going to be able to ask questions, so sorry about that. But for the people here, again, if you can't make it to the gallery for a talk, if Facebook is working, you can always watch the live stream on Facebook, or we later post a recorded version on YouTube. It's just go to the Coast Street Arts channel, and all our talks and videos of all our exhibitions are there. So before I turn it over to Lissa and Carol, let me say a little bit about each of them. hopefully you know Lissa very well from coming to the gallery. You can cheer. She's pretty much in an annual show here, whether a solo show or one that she curates, and be on the lookout because there will be another Lissa Hunter production come next fall. Her work is in the permanent collections of the Smithsonian in DC, the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, the Museum of Art and Design in New York, and the Houston Museum of Art, among others. She's also a Maine Arts Commission Individual Artist Fellow in the Maine Crafts Association Master Craft Artist, as well as a life trustee of Haystack Mountain School of Crafts. Now, a bit about Carol. You may not be familiar with her work, at least seeing it here, because this is our first show of Carol's work. So hopefully you got a chance beforehand to walk around and check out the show. If not, you can do so after the talk, of course. So a little bit about Carol. She received her art degree from RISD and her social work degree from Simmons School of Social Work. And in addition to being a visual artist, Carol is a psychotherapist. So be careful with your questions. Her artwork has been exhibited nationally and regionally in both galleries and museums, including the Museum of Art and Design in New York. And she's participated in residencies, including one at Haystack, and she's also taught at Haystack. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carol and Lissa. Thank you.
Thank you, John. First of all, I think we both want to thank Coast Street for doing this sort of thing. It's quite wonderful. It's lovely to have your work shown somewhere, but to actually be able to talk to people about it and ask questions is sort of that's what you really want to do, because you want your work to reach people. So thank you for being here, and thank you, Coast Street, for having this. And thank you for getting out the slick, windy weather to be here. Carol and I have known each other for, we can't decide.
We think 30 years.
30
25.
years, 25 or 30 years. She was a student of mine at Haystack. And she, my mic is on. We've been warned.
There it goes.
We have been warned that they, okay, I'm gonna put it this way so you can see. If this starts flashing, then it's off. So that's right. Poor design, we could have done better. It was I don't even remember what the class was specifically, but you had already learned coiling, and you did some things there that were very interesting within this class, and that was our first. And I think after that, we went to North Country Studio Workshops,
yes.
Within a year of that time, which is a wonderful program if you don't know it. Every 2 years in January, North Country Studios is its own organization, and they have workshops at Bennington College in Vermont. And it's wonderful. There you are in the middle of the winter with nothing else to do. So you go there with like-minded people in about 8 or 10 different workshops, and it's quite terrific. We got to know each other a little better there. When you teach workshops, you meet many, many, many people, all of whom you adore because they've signed up and paid money to actually come hear what you have to say and to learn what you're doing. But there are people occasionally, usually who live near enough by, with whom you click immediately. And that's better? Sounds horrible to me, but okay, thank you. And that started our friendship, I would say. Yeah. Tell us where you grew up and what you She is an extraordinary person for many reasons, one of which is she has an 101-year-old mother who is still an extraordinary personage in this world.
It's true.
Yeah.
Well, first, I'll thank everybody for being here, and also thank you to John. How's that? Okay, great. To John and Kelly for showing my work, and Diamond, and I'm not quite sure who put it up, but thank you. I'm very glad to be here. Let's see, I grew up in Connecticut, and from a very young age, I had this desire to understand other people's worlds and understand what people's lives were like. And I remember my mother saying to me, God, you've got really quite an imagination, because whenever we would drive, I would say, I really want to look in that person's house. I wonder what their lives are like. And I always really liked being able to look through a window, but see through out to the outside. I didn't really want to get stuck in that place. I just wanted to look in and see what it was. And my mother, even though I wanted to go to art school, discouraged me from going to art school because she was worried about my, as a woman, being able to make a living and being independent. And so I didn't go to art school. So I went to college and I majored in art and anthropology. And after that, I got my master's in social work because I really did have an affinity to trying to understand people. And I worked for a while as a psychotherapist, and I thought, you know what, I really want to go to art school. So I took a class at Haystack in 1982 with Ed Lambert, who was a painter on fabric, on silk. And I took the work that I did there to the head of the textile department at RISD, and asked her what she thought. And she said, apply, which I did, and I got accepted. And I only had to do the studio work. I only had to take one academic art history class. So that was fortunate that I could apply all my other academics and get my degree.
What did your mother say when you did that?
You know, she wasn't opposed to it. She knew I wanted it, and by then she knew I could make a living. Yeah. And that was an important thing, and it really was. It really did give me a way of doing both things. And I'm not sure I had what it would have taken to just be an artist and do whatever I needed to do to make a living. I'm not sure I could have done it. Anyway, this allowed me to do it in a way that worked for me, and to have a family and to have children, all of which was important to me. So let's see. So I went to RISD, I got married, I'd had a couple of children, I majored in weaving, and
How did you decide? Weaving, fibers?
I loved fibers. I loved knitting. Well, this is sort of a good story.
Still loves knitting.
My maternal grandmother was really important in my life. She was like a force of nature, as is my mother. And she lived till she was 103. And she was a survivor in many, many ways. And not an easy mother to have, but a wonderful grandma to have. But she would knock, like her hands, we'd be sitting and she'd be knocking on the table and constantly. And I couldn't stand it, but I loved her. And I thought, oh boy, I never want to be like that. And so I learned to knit as a young girl, which was hugely helpful to me, because I think I probably would have had some of that same neurotic energy. And knitting was hugely helpful to me. And so I loved yarn, I loved fiber, and I had the choice of concentrating on surface design or weaving, and I preferred the weaving. Then I got out of school and had 2 young children close together, 2 years apart, and my attic at that time was my studio, and I would try to thread my loom with my babies running around, and I thought, this is really going to go nowhere fast. And that's when I went to Haystack to take classes in off-loom textile techniques.
How many classes do you think you took at Haystack? I mean, 2
I
or
must have
8?
taken probably 5,
Yeah.
probably around 5, but very stretched out. Maybe 5 years, 8 years.
I think to give a plug, I don't know if you're familiar with Haystack Mountain School of Crafts in Deer Isle, Maine, but it has 2 weeks classes during the summertime with people from all over the world who teach these classes. And I think it's really important for people who are in just this kind of position where you're trying to figure things out, you're out in the world, you're not college age, you're not a graduate student, but you still have this force that you want to do something. So that to get there for just 2 weeks can change your life because you have that experience. And Carol was clever enough to realize she could go back several times, and that kind of became a driving force for what you did.
Yeah, and it was wonderful to be with people who, you can relate to, and everybody's really working hard, and the studios are open 24 hours a day. It was really a wonderful experience.
How did you get, okay, so you're married, have the kids, you're doing the things, you're weaving something. How did basketry come into that?
Well, partly because I couldn't weave, and I just couldn't sit at my loom. I ended up giving it to a dear friend of mine who I met at RISD, who was also an older student like I was when I went.
Older being
28.
28.
But at the time, it was old. And so the beauty of making baskets is I could carry my material with me. So I could be with my children and family and watch TV, and I could coil, and it allowed me to always be working, which was great because it's such a slow process, but also I felt like I was really attending to my need to make art, and that was a great thing.
That was about the same time, I think, that a lot of us were starting out, and the basketry movement, the notion that there were contemporary baskets as opposed to native baskets or some of the traditional baskets that have always been important, but didn't have that sense of today. But that was happening at the same time, and I think you and I both sort of benefited from that.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
She was on the cover of American Craft magazine, and those kinds of things that, for a basket maker, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was really lucky.
Yeah.
I mean, I worked for about 5 years and didn't show anybody what I was working on. And then I decided I would go back to RISD and talk to the head of the weaving department, who was important to me. And this was a big deal, and it was a big drive when you have children and you're working. And I put all my work in my car, and I drove down, and I set everything up in the critique room. And within 2 minutes, after she came in, she said, "Oh my God, I forgot I have a hair appointment." It was pretty off. And I packed, and I'm not even sure after that if we continued or if I just said, this wouldn't have been my style, I'll just go to your appointment. I would have said that at that time. But it was a very useful lesson for me because I came back and I put all my work back in my studio, and I said, really, it doesn't matter. Really, it matters. I just have to have my own voice. I have to keep driving to have my own voice and put it into the work I do. So as painful as that was, it was very useful for me. And then I applied to the Smithsonian Craft Show. And I hadn't been in any galleries. I hadn't done anything. I'm not a swell promoter. And I got into the Smithsonian Crafts Fair, and I went, and my mother and my sister came with me and helped me set up and did all that stuff. And luckily for me, there was a woman who was starting a new gallery in Arizona, and she really liked my work, and she sold a big piece there to a collector, and she did so much to promote my work for me. And she's no longer alive. galleries, it doesn't exist anymore, but that was a huge help for me to.
That's a story that in some iteration is kind of familiar to all of us who make work, that we're not out there to be the biggest in the out, don't do that. It's something you do. Do you think I should do this? You do it. Somebody sees it. They do something. They see somebody. Then, and it's, I think one of the lovely things about being in craft, I don't know about the larger painting or more art field, but in the craft field and now the craft art field, there is a lot of that. I think everybody has a story like that. I certainly do. And it's quite wonderful. You can't plan it. You just have to be doing good work and be ready and show up. And then, something's going to happen. So that's great. I think it's interesting. I know when I hear people talk, artists talk, I'd like to hear something about them as people, but then also about the artwork. So about the artwork. One of my notions of making art of any kind is that you're working with materials and techniques and ideas. The materials quite often come first. You say, oh, I like fibers. So you're going to learn how to weave. And then you say, oh, if I weave, I can knit, and then maybe I'll learn how to crochet and things like that. And then at some point, you've knitted enough sweaters or whatever it is, and you say, what do I want to say with these things? And that's sort of a process that I think a lot of us would say is part of our process. Why? We know why you liked fibers. We know you started with that. But then you started working in metals as well, both with the fiber, but mostly as its own thing.
That was sort of a way to make money, making art, and rather than taking on more clients, actually. And
Therapy clients.
Therapy clients. And because I went to the RISD alumni fair, and I would make jewelry. I started making jewelry, and then once a year would go there and do fairly well. I mean, I sold a lot of work, so that's sort of how that started.
So just to show you.
And I'll just say, the reason I started making that jewelry was I really coveted this necklace in a very expensive gallery, and I really wanted it, and there was no way I could buy it. And I must have dreamt about it because I woke up and I said, oh my God, I can do a knockoff.
An homage. An homage.
And that's how I started beading and making jewelry. And then I also went back to Haystack and took jewelry making classes with mostly cold connections.
Yeah. And it's kind of an interesting connection that in fibers and textiles, it's very additive. You're always adding things, you're wrapping things, you're connecting things. That's the nature of the process, as opposed to clay, where you have a material that you're working in another way. It's not additive in the same way. But metals, the way you work them, is very textile-like.
Yes, and that particularly the pieces with the many pieces. Those are shapes that I use in my jewelry. And I sort of fell in love with a particular graphite pencil, which I just became obsessed with. And
that was my next question. What's your favorite material?
I can't even explain to you exactly what it does, but it's very much like the metal. It gives me the same feeling as, like, this is copper that I oxidized, and same bracelet. It's something about the blackness and the matte-ness of the color. But my work with Lissa, my class with you, I think, was around how do you think about what you're after, and how do you have an idea and get closer to that idea to try to transfer it visually. And that didn't come easily to me. I think you are really good at that, and I'm a little bit more impulsive and intuitive, but I've gotten much better, and I think my work hopefully looks a little deeper, since I get an idea, I experiment with my materials, And I feel like I have an easier access to what the feeling is that I'm after when I'm doing the work. I can sort of get closer to my own feeling of what I'm after. So.
Well, and I think that's a part of this materials and techniques. The more you know about what these materials will do for you, and you feel confidence, and you can, it's like knowing words. If you were to say, somebody said to you, you have to write a poem, and you'd say, oh, okay, whatever. You have to write it in Greek. Oh my gosh, you wouldn't do that. You have to write it about fall in Vermont in Greek, and it has to be a poem. Suddenly it all seems so difficult. But if it could be a poem, that could be free verse, and it's about fall in someplace where you've been, and it's in English, and when all of those things become more familiar, then it lets you go to that place. And we have had a studio relationship, studio dates we call them, for 10 years maybe. So I've seen, she's watched what I do, and I've watched what she's done over this period of time. And I've seen that growth, what I would call growth. It's just a change, it's just a development of feeling more comfortable with what you're saying. Even if you don't know quite what it is, you're using these materials and you're starting to put them together, and they start talking to you, and then you start pushing them. Do you work in series of sorts? Does any of the work come out of previous work in a kind of, sidestep way, or is it pretty linear that you're working? Do you know what I mean?
I think it comes. I think what's interesting is if I look at things in my studio, if I look at failures, I get a sense of what I was after, but I wasn't very successful at it. And there's something liberating in doing something and going, oh, that is so bad, I hate that. Because it's freeing, and sometimes I use some of the actual work, or sometimes I just start from scratch. And I do work in series. I mean, like these with the netting was going back to that feeling of being a young girl and looking through screens and looking through windows and wanting to see something, but having, some places are thicker, the netting I tried to make thicker in areas where you can see a little bit more. And I really like that idea, and I like to keep pushing that idea and pushing the netting, this looping. So that was one series. In terms of the faces, I was thinking, not in a dissimilar way, but, what do we look out on? What are we seeing? What do we have to see through to see our world? How much do people see into us? And can you see into somebody? And so those, which is also obviously as a psychotherapist, I try to help people look into themselves and understand themselves and get at feelings that maybe they don't understand, and it starts somewhere and it goes somewhere else, and they're like, I don't even understand the connection. But giving space for that connection to be found.
Those are the two figures are drawings and then enhanced. And how does drawing, because the collages, I think one draws with line and shape in a way, but they're not pencil on paper drawing. How does drawing figure into what you do? How you see your practice?
Well, it's sort of, I think for myself, I needed to know that I could draw. I mean, when I got into RISD, one of the things that I had to do in my portfolio was to do a drawing of shoes. And I had taken art in high school, but, and I happened to have had a wonderful teacher in high school, but I didn't have a lot of practice. And I could draw these boots, like I couldn't believe I drew them. They practically walked off the page, and they were my favorite black boots. And when I'm not sure, I go back to drawing. And I reassure myself that I can actually draw. And it's very helpful to me. And it's also, it's a calming thing because you can't really, or at least for me, I'm not thinking about anything. So my mind is quiet and I'm just looking at what I'm drawing. I took Lissa to there's a wonderful antique store where I live, and one booth has really old tools. Like you don't know what the hell these tools are. And they're old and they're cracked and they're worn out. And I loved drawing these tools. And I have, it's not here, but I have a lot of work that are sort of realistic drawings of them, but then I abstracted them a lot. And that helps me. So that's where drawing enters the picture.
How do you see the relationship of abstract and realistic? For instance, the basket back here has realistic, somewhat abstracted plant forms, but then obviously a bird on top.
Right.
You know, how do you balance that sense of realism and abstract, or is it at all important to you? Does it just happen because the piece needs it?
No, that happened because I love looking at cardinals. Particularly in the winter time. And we have a bird feeder. And I just get this, it's sort of like the pencil. I just get this feeling of such utter contentment watching this bird. And so that's where that piece, but I wanted to abstract it. I wanted it to, because I like abstraction. And
Well, and it's really hard to make a really realistic
That's
bird
right.
with coilings. It's
Right.
not easy, so
so,
not to diminish.
oh, no. But yeah, I guess pushing things away from reality, but you have still a sense of whence they come.
Right, yeah, beautiful. Whose work do you look at? What other artists do you look at?
Lately, this was probably the best show I've ever been to for me. It's a woman, Simone Lee. She is a ceramicist, and she started making small pieces, but she makes the most monumental structures. And she had a show at the ICA in Boston, and her work to me is like, you can't get better than that. It's and
Simone Lee.
Simone Lee, Leigh. It's figurative. You should really Google her. It's just breathtaking to me. And it's so clearly her voice, like I've never seen anything like it. It's not derivative. She's pushed her ideas. There's another ceramicist, Robert Brady, and his work is also, he moved away from just pure ceramics and does woodworking and carving and drawing, and it's so unique, like I've never seen work like it before. Who else? I like Diebenkorn, I like to look at his paintings a lot. And I think you were the one who introduced me to Leonard Baskin, particularly his drawings of raptors, which are also so weird. And he combines these raptors with, I think, his own body sense, and it's unnerving, but it's really beautiful. So I would say those.
Well, it's interesting because everybody named has a very singular voice. And that's, I think, what we're all after. And it's wonderful to see that exemplified outside of yourself in a way that you think, okay, that's it. And to be able to possibly sort of get into that. You mentioned a couple, but have there been turning points along the way, shall we say, that happened either by choice or by accident or whatever that were very important to you?
Well, I think 9/11 changed my work. And I started doing images of people on my baskets, like like the one behind is not all coiled, it's paper. And so I changed and I started doing a lot of faces. And I did a really big piece, the one that's in the Museum of Art and Design, right after 9/11, where I drew a lot of faces, I split them in half, I put them together, and sort of this hope of, we're all the same, you can't tell, just. So that really changed my work, and I did that for a long time.
Those were very strong pieces.
And then I got a little tired of this being bound to the structure of a basket, and I started doing more two-dimensional pieces and incorporating some textile techniques in that. And I guess the other thing was COVID. And I retired from being a psychotherapist, so I had more time. And I sort of freaked. I went into my studio and said, oh my gosh, now I have no excuses, I don't have any time, my children are grown, and I just can do this.
And talk about your studio a bit. It is.
I have a ridiculously beautiful studio at the moment. It's a dream studio. And we've been in this house for about 12 years. And prior to that, my kitchen was my studio, my attic was my studio, my basement was my studio. This is a real studio.
It was built as a studio.
It was built as a studio of someone else who went to RISD, actually. And it's a beautiful space.
Actually, that's kind of pressure. I mean,
I did
you
feel
felt
pressure.
that responsibility for.
I really did, yes. My husband was here, knew it. I'm like, oh my God. We have this house and I have this studio.
Well, he has a wood shop that's pretty swell too. So.
And I have all this time. And I had saved a lot of failed pieces. And I had boxes of, paper, drawing, painting, And so that's when I started doing the collage work. And a lot of these collages have a lot of drawing underneath. But I said, stop being precious, get over it, don't worry about it. It's a piece of paper. And that allowed me to explore a little bit more, the piece over there. That looks nothing like what it looks like. And, sometimes I think, oh God, maybe I should have taken a picture, maybe I should have stopped sooner. And other times I say it doesn't, really, that's not what the process is about. And I continue to say it's just a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And that's very helpful.
It's kind of essential, I think, yeah. We've often talked about the notion of being an artist as a process and not a product maker, that you're not making these things, you're involved in a process of seeing the world and taking in information and taking materials and techniques and making these things, but they're just a product of this process. So they go here, there, whatever, and your process continues. So to be able to look back at things that you've done and not be precious about them. Oh, I remember making that, it was so pretty. Say, no, it's a piece of paper. It's a very brave thing and a very smart thing. And I think to be able to then you have that material to work with, which already has a sense of you in it. And then to go on and work with it.
It's working for me, so that's very lucky.
It's a good thing you didn't clean house.
I
Get rid of all that stuff. What would you say to a younger artist today? We were talking about this before. If you had to say something pithy to someone who says, I'm 22 years old and I want to be an artist, or what would you say to your younger self? Maybe, I don't know. Does anything come to mind, or is it as blank as mine is on that? Other than just do it, the old Nike philosophy of just do it.
I guess I would say listen to yourself. You know, just listen to the voices that you have and the inclinations that you have and what keeps coming back to you. Because really, had I listened to my mother, and I did listen to my mother in many ways, that
You still listen to her.
happened not to be one of the ways, I wouldn't be here. So I think you have to really allow yourself to be true to your own inclinations, whatever they are.
And you're to be congratulated in having done this over time. If I were to go back and get in contact with people in art school, either in undergraduate or graduate school, women particularly, I would say that about 5% of them are still making art. Because, and that was, you know, in the 60s, so times were different for women, but still, there is this sense in which you can't do it if you have a family, if you do these other things, and you've done it, and I think that's to be commended. So.
Thank you. It did haunt me forever. I delegitimized myself as an artist because it wasn't the only thing I was doing.
Yeah.
And finally, I no longer do that. And I guess I would say that to a young female artist. Just live the life you want and make the art you want to make. And you're as legitimate as anybody else.
Amen. Well, I think that's a great place to start with this. Except questions. Do y'all have any questions for Carol?
It's not so much a question as I would like to hear a little bit more about, you were talking about process, and earlier on you started talking about sort of gazing in, that voyeurism. And these pieces with the netting to me are so interesting because, as you say, you are looking through the netting at an image, but it had to be processed because you've got a painting and then you've covered it. And I understand some of that netting you knitted. And then the way it's framed, it's almost
Well,
like.
so that is actually, my husband made a frame for me because in order to do this, you have to have a stiff frame. So underneath this is another really thin piece of wood, plywood. And I made holes, you make holes all the way along and you have to start and you make the looping. So you have to go row by row by row by row. And that's how that's made.
Did you have the underpiece, the collage behind already done when you started the looping, or did you just sort of do this and do that and put them together and then see what happened?
This one, I started out with the piece underneath it. For these two, I knew that I was going to make a series, and I did the.
Yeah. And I must say, because I've seen these in the studio, and most studios have light that's usable for what you're doing, but not necessarily for what you're seeing on the walls. And to see them in this light, they just are a whole other level because of this good light, and the light underneath pulls out and shows through in a whole different way. It's really wonderful.
Thank you.
Did Carol get a question?
Yes.
What was the most frustrating and difficult piece for you?
Okay, I'll tell you which one. It's this basket over here. That actually had a different bottom and different material that I was coiling with. And I liked it, but over time, it didn't hold its own and it was sinking. And actually, Lissa was there at the time, and I said, "Oh God, this is driving me bananas." So I cut it off. I cut the basket off. And then I had to recoil this. But it's not that easy to come and make this a tight union here. And it was really a pain in the neck. And I really wasn't enjoying it.
I don't really like this when people ask it, but how many hours did
Oh,
it
God,
take
you
to do?
You can't even think about And you shouldn't think about it because it's ridiculous.
Another question?
So I was interested that you went to baskets just out of logistics. You could carry this stuff around. Do you do baskets now? And now that you have this beautiful studio, when's the last basket that you made?
The fact is, I haven't made, oh no, I take that back. I did recently, for a different dough, a very small basket. I haven't made baskets in a long time. I guess because when I'm working in the two-dimensional and the looping, I'm getting enough satisfaction in terms of being creative, and it's faster. And so no, I haven't.
Just as a side note, I think your baskets, when I see them, I think that somebody opened up King Tut's tomb and they found it next to the sarcophagus. They're just beautiful. They're just
Thank you
beautiful.
very much. He's my pal. Not because he asked that, because I know him for a long time.
Yeah, he's right too. So it's one of the nice things about basketry forms is it's one of the curses and blessings of a basketry form. It comes as, everybody grew up with a basket here or there. Their grandmother carried a basket with sewing in it or whatever. So there's a familiarity which brings you in, but then it also can sort of diminish what you've done because it's only a basket. So one of the things that the contemporary basket movement has done, I think, is to sort of place them in a position of being just as important as an urn or whatever. So yes, they do look like King Tuts. Any other questions? We've covered the,
On the subject of, I think,
it's for the taping.
on the subject of baskets, the other basket had some knitting elements. Could you explain that and how you achieved that?
So that is, I guess knitting is a little more, I knit all the time. I mean, I'm always knitting. And so I decided to incorporate more knitting in my work. And this is Japanese paper. It's pretty fragile, so I really have to focus on it so I don't rip it. So I knit this. It's like sewing.
Sewing thread size.
Yeah, it's like thread. It's really a little nutty. And then I was thinking about shadows, and so I just adhered this to paper. And this is paper. It's thick paper. I glued lots of different pieces of paper together so I could mold it. So that's where that cut goes.
It makes me, you said you discussed it, they're looking in, but we're doing that too, it just includes all that.
Yeah, no, it's true, absolutely. And
All of the community projects.
It's one of the things my husband said to me years ago. He says, "No, let me get this straight." This is when I was making paper. He said, "You buy paper pulp in sheets and you tear it up and you make paper out of it. And then you have that paper and then you tear it up and you put it on a basket." It was like, yeah, So knitting something that's absolutely beautiful on its own, and then you put it on something else. Any other questions? Well, you've been lovely because you've all stayed with us, and I think Carol has. Please look at the work more. Any questions you have, Carol will be available and we can chat. Safe travels home.